Hi to everyone who's joined us so far. We'll wait a couple of minutes for those who are still making their way to the webinar. We'll kick off in a couple of minutes. All right, you ready to go, Jason?
I am once I'm off mute.
Awesome. Do you drink coffee, Jason?
All the time.
Yeah.
Play too much.
I'm addicted. I found this wonderful YouTube channel that does great coffee, but
Is that the English guy?
yes, that's the English guy. Yeah, no, he's great.
Yeah, he's very good. Very good cinematography as well.
I just enjoy listening to him talk to about coffee. It's very meditative. Anyway, enough about coffee. You didn't come here to hear about coffee. So thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Daniel from Leonardo, and I look after marketing at Leonardo. And joining us today is senior consultant and all-round RPA legend Jason, who we've been talking to about coffee. So today we're going to be talking about how you can start up or scale up your RPA journey, and some in considerations that we believe it's good for your business to think about. So just before I sort of start on the actual the content, these are the upcoming webinars that we have on our schedule. So we have today's webinar on RPA. We have a serverless architecture webinar that myself and Tara will be talking about next week. We're talking about compliance and how that's been reshaped with in 2020, and how you can leverage a process-centric approach to do that. And we had a process mining webinar last week, which was fantastic. And we've got a follow-up to that on June the 10th. And we'll be announcing a few more next week that will fill the pipeline of a whole range of cool things that we think it's worthwhile sharing with you. So just a reminder, if you've got any questions, there's a Q&A function there. If you want to have a chat to people, there's a chat there. Use it diligently, of course. And we've also we also stream on YouTube for those people on YouTube. But as I've said before, any questions, we're not looking at that currently. So before we start, we're ready to go. All right, so let's kick off. So I suppose, today we're going to be talking about firing up your business efforts. Whether that's from the start, maybe you're kicking off something, or you're wanting to restart an initiative. You've had something that's failed previously. So what we're going to do today is going to talk about how you might do that, and we're going to set some context first before looking at some of those things you consider. So I suppose over the last few years, it's been hard to avoid the discussion around RPA. We hear and we see trends about growth in RPA, such as the data like this slide here around tech spend and where it's going in terms of services. And Gartner for many years have sort of very cautiously underplayed the impact of RPA, at least at an enterprise level, before last year elevating RPA as a key emerging enterprise technology area. So I suppose initially, and I'm sort of thinking 5-10 years ago, we saw the market's reaction to the magic of what RPA can do for you as a business, as it rose on Gartner's hype cycle here. It's since sort of fallen. It's on the downward slope there, down to, what do they call it now? The peak of inflated expectations. So it's just going down there with a few other things that are there. So Gartner, as I said, Gartner pegged this as the fastest growing enterprise-wide software category. And there are plenty of numbers to back this up, even already this year, and some of the challenges we've had, that further growth has actually been met in the market. But I suppose, we're also sort of seeing the reality checks for those who have tried and those who have misfired using RPA to solve business problems. And that's what we're going to talk to you about today. So, enterprises might have thought that RPA is all about the tactical, and there might be some on this chat here, in this webinar, who might be wincing a bit at that tactical word. I know that's a sore point for people, but I think some of those enterprises might have sold short their own automation strategies by thinking as RPA is just tactical. So I suppose that we want to emphasize and talk generally that businesses are learning that not all processes are ideal for RPA, and that deploying bots isn't the same as a broader automation strategy for the enterprise. So, like any tech, as the adoption grows, so do gaps in what the technology can and can't deliver. If you have a proof of concept and it fails, those failures create perceptions in the business, and thus a reality check emerges, especially in businesses that I suppose have an unrealistic expectation of what RPA can achieve or should achieve. And especially also in those organizations that don't have a solid grasp of their own processes. They're attributing the failure to RPA when it's a failure of their own processes. They've tried to automate something. They've tried to use RPA that's not been fit for purpose, or haven't understood where it sits in everything else they're doing. I suppose the limitation there is because RPA can mimic things that people do with computers. Use cases for RPA are often limited, and they're constrained to computer-based processes in the way that humans perform them. But we know there are far more efficient forms of automation, such as using APIs rather than using RPA in some use cases. Jason will talk more on that later. I am not the SME. He's that guy. So I suppose, there has been some discussion very, very recently around RPA falling on that hype cycle that I talked about. I suppose any general will tell you that looking after the troops and keeping them well fed and organized and ready and firing for battle is a challenge. And I suppose that's similar to RPA. And rolling out and maintaining an army of bots is a formidable challenge. And most businesses and, dare say it, even some vendors, they don't really know how to manage all this. It's still really new. In terms of expectations, many organizations often classify RPA under their umbrella, AI umbrella. But as we've said, the RPA, at least, in the early days, was often deployed to mimic human activity. So adding intelligence means the bots need to be, capable of decision-making based on a set of instructions. And that set of instructions need to be trained or enabled by something, some AI tool. But this needs to happen sort of in the requirements phase, in the design before deployment. More work needs to be done here to make RPA intelligent. And enterprises that expect this intelligent, baked in, often sort of fall short in their expectations. So if you look at recent Forrester Wave report, it reveals that the concept of RPA, of enterprise RPA platform, is still really, really new. We're still in a growth phase here. The leading RPA tech vendors are rapidly expanding their capabilities based on evolving client needs. I look at, when I first came into Leonardo and I was looking at a whole bunch of RPA tools, they're like completely different beasts now, and the report echoes that customers' desires for RPA solutions extend well beyond task automation that maybe RPA tools were known for a few years ago. So they're looking at integrating AI to enable much broader use cases and much more sophisticated forms of automation as the market's changing. So it's adding intelligence into that process automation component. So I suppose, where does RPA fit in all this? So, intelligent process automation isn't new, and it's called by many names. Like Gartner calls it hyper automation. That's a really cool term. Forrester calls it digital process automation, or at least they did last time I checked. And IDC still calls it intelligent process automation, or at least they did so when I last checked. For us, it's mostly the same sort of thing. There might be some academic differences, but we had a webinar about this a few years ago. If you're interested in what we think that looks like beyond just what a vendor or a technology person might say. I suppose it simply means pairing process automation with cognitive features to achieve an outcome. So where does RPA fit? Well, here's an analogy that I've stole from one of our partners. So imagine you're a golfer and you're standing on the tee and you need to get the ball down the fairway, over the bunkers, onto the green and into that little, 3-inch hole. If you're standing there and you're only holding a putter, i.e. your AI tool, you're probably going to find it difficult, if not impossible, to get there, okay? Both you and the ball will be bored by the end. The aim of golf is to get there in as few strokes as possible. And you'll probably bake 20 or 30 if you're just sitting there and you're smashing a ball every 15 meters with a small little putter on a half a kilometer golf course. So using one type of club is never going to allow you to get that little white ball in the hole the same way, and this is the same way that using one type of automation tool is not going to get you to automate your entire business end to end. It's just not going to work. You need a combination of drivers and irons and putters to get to get from the tee into the green into the hole. So what does that look like in terms of this analogy? Well, you'll need IBMS tools like K2 and Pega and Nintex and Process Auto Manager, and there's a whole bunch of them. RPA tools like UiPath and Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere. You'll need cognitive tools like Abby or Seralytics, and AI tools like IBM Watson or Google TensorFlow. And I suppose reaching the green for us means implementing that intelligent process automation or hyper automation, So the drivers are the IPMS and RPA, the irons are maybe the cognitive tools, and the, like Abby, and the putter represents AI tools like, TensorFlow or Watson or something. So I suppose, as I mentioned previously, these tools, these tools are now wrapping all this into one platform to meet the demands of the market, and meet the demands of these crazy golfers or clients. So what's the problem statement? If we start here, you're trying to begin where you're starting, how you're scaling up. So what's the problem statement your RPA project is addressing? Have you done RPA before? Where do you start? Do you have to deal with those current perceptions like I talked about, such as bots can do magic? We just deploy this thing, it'll be great. Or it broke last time, we're very wary, What's the opportunity areas in your business? And how do you identify these? Where do you start to identify these? How do you practically know what of your processes are suitable for RPA? And how do you industrialize this for both business and IT? You need a process. You need a process to feed your robotic process automation pipeline. I've done enough talking. So Jason, how do you build that RPA factory to fill that pipeline and build the RPA machine?
It's a good analogy, isn't it? Factory. I guess I really like Stephen Covey. One of his, lessons that he preaches is start with the end in mind. So what are we trying to achieve with RPA? What is the automation strategy? Is that strategy aligned to business units, to the broader organization? I guess once you understand what you're trying to solve, that should be inbuilt in all of the phases of the automation delivery lifecycle. Now we've put some here that we believe at a high level indicate the different phases of automation, but obviously there's a lot more deeper processes underneath each one of these. And I guess it all starts with identify. I guess you touched on it earlier, Daniel, a bit, where if you choose the wrong process, you might build the best bot that the world's ever seen. But if that process isn't suitable for RPA, you're not going to get the outcome that the business actually needs or wants. So if you have your strategy, obviously you would have things like what are the key metrics we're looking to sort of touch with RPA. Then every stage should sort of be aligned to those metrics. With the identify phase, obviously we're playing with tools like process mining, where you can do mass process identification and get the data behind the processes. I guess where businesses are struggling at the moment with RPA is when they talk to subject matter experts of the process. They might get 5 different flavors of the same process, and also have unknowns existing all the way to the operate phase that you just don't know until you do it. So if you're trying to scale and you've got those kind of problems, how do you sort of solve that at scale? and technologies like process mining, task mining are looking to try and solve those problems. Obviously, in the define phase, I guess that touches on, a bit, I guess, coming on the back of the identifier. How do you define the problem that you're trying to solve? Do you need to solve the whole problem, or do you actually get enough benefit by deploying 50% of the solution? Can you use task capture, step recorder tools to help with that definition when you're talking about at scale? Documenting the as-is process with subject matter experts. With the design phase, obviously, it's very important to have standards, frameworks, processes to ensure everything that's going to be going down the factory line is aligned to your strategy for automation. And this can be very unique to organizations as well, based on their application landscape or their people or their inbuilt processes. I guess it's what fits best for an organization to scale. Testing was very interesting. UiPath have just released their test tool. So it's very cool to see the RPA space branching out into test automation. I guess my personal history, I started in test automation, branching out into RPA. So it's like the inverse is happening now. But I guess with tools like that, how does an organization use that to actually scale their factory floor? Deploy, obviously you've got things like CI/CD, pipelines. For those to work, you need the right operating model, the right standards, technologies in place. And through all these phases, I guess, is what is enough for the organization to meet what they're trying to shoot for? Is organization just have a goal to deploy 5 bots? Or do they want to release 200,000 hours of manual effort a year? I guess what supports that goal that the organization is shooting for? Obviously, in the operate phase, you need to have very skilled people that understand both the digital process that now exists and then infrastructure, the automation platform itself, good understanding of ITIL is helpful as well. So how do you manage incidents and problems? Then obviously the improve phase. So obviously we want to have a way of feeding back our pipeline where we may not have hit the mark, or we've understood we can release further benefits to an organization with deployed bots. So I guess how does the organization manage that? Probably next slide, Daniel, I think. Yeah, so I guess at its core, it's about your people, your supporting processes, and your supporting technology, and what makes sense to realize your own automation strategy. What I've found is organizations, a lot of RPA starts in a business, and it may be sold as something really easy to do, but you actually need very skilled people to build good RPA processes, but then you also need very good process people that actually understand process and how do you apply automation to it to get the right outcome for the organization. I'm personally a fan of data-driven bots. So how do you make your bots probably even dumber by serving them up all the data they need for the process up front? So there's no screen scraping or anything like that involved. And all they're doing is the business logic rules and they're performing the value-added task. But there's lots of different ways, I guess, you can go about solving problems at a high level. With what's probably very lacking out there in the market as well is a really deep understanding of the SLAs and OLAs for each individual process that the bots have now automated. Obviously, that's going to drive how much supporting infrastructure, how many people you need to support those processes in production. Does your automation platform need something like high availability to reduce operational risk around those digital workers in prod? Those are all, I guess, questions that need to be answered for the organization. And obviously, a lot of those things come with a cost as well. So what is that sweet spot of the ROI because you do need to invest in your digital workers just like your human workers. How do you enable your people to feed your factory? So how do you do that RPA awareness program with the knowledge of what makes a good automation candidate at scale? How do you get that change management out into your organization? Is that through showcases? Is that through bringing people in to a center of excellence and then injecting them out into the business? I guess there's lots of different strategies you can employ, and it's probably what works well for your people. And obviously technology. So RPA is quite an amazing technology, but where you can get really powerful is probably what Daniel touched on earlier as well, is this hyper automation, I guess, wave that's coming. How do you integrate with other tools and technologies to solve problems, especially around things like APIs, where someone's already gone about the effort of automating part of a process. If you're looking to automate an end-to-end process with RPA, can you utilize existing APIs to solve part of your problem, and then you reduce your footprint for RPA as well. So you reduce your maintenance costs, because hopefully those APIs are being maintained by the organization. This probably it on that slide, Dan. So now business versus IT.
Yeah, I might talk about a bit of business IT. So we, I suppose we know what's in play. I suppose, how do we know what's in play with RPA and what isn't? So we all know there's friction between business and IT. That's RPA is usually, I suppose, initiated by the business. And IT traditionally want to protect technology and infrastructure. And this is an area that we, Leonardo does a lot of work in. We play at this intersection of business and IT. And often the battlefield is this topic. IPA, AI, hyper automation. Intelligent process automation, whatever you want to call it. So I suppose we're seeing that the business sometimes lacks ideas in this field, and so they may miss opportunities to improve and transform. So I suppose typically in the past, the business would engage with IT to deliver projects that they would be thinking of. And now the business is still coming up to speed with AI and IPA, and particularly how to apply it. So there's an opportunity, I suppose, for IT to inspire the business with what's possible when they're devising their ideas and their next project. So we have this sort of bit of a catch call. We talk about IT inspired, business driven, IT enabled. So I suppose, Jason, how does the CIO or the CTO or the CFO balance all this stuff?
Yeah, so I think they need to work together. It's probably the main point, I guess. And if there is a strategy in place, everyone should understand where we're trying to go as an organization. So hopefully everyone's on board the train. And where I've seen RPA be the most successful is when everyone is working as one team, and both the IT and business teams are heavily involved in the program. I guess what I've found, well, in terms of IT, I guess they have an underlying mandate from the organization is to protect those technology platforms and invest in them to unlock further benefits for the organization, or just to keep up with regulatory change, or to drive further efficiencies. But I guess they may perceive RPA as eroding any future investment for those platforms. And I guess that's where the battle lines can sometimes get drawn up. What I've found works well is it's a discussion with these platform owners around what are the guardrails we want to set up for RPA. Do we not want to touch certain platforms because there's a known investment going in, say a year's time, where that whole platform will be going? Do we want to only touch certain functions within the application because there's a better way of solving it through that platform natively? What are the, I guess, OLAs for the digital workers performing work on those platforms? Do they need to account for batching? Should the digital workers be using, I guess, the headroom that may be available overnight for these systems to reduce any, I guess, pressure on them from a digital worker point of view? And obviously the RPA the digital workers still need these applications up and running as well. I guess if the application's not working, they're not going to be processing any work. So the digital worker is actually a stakeholder for these IT applications as well. And I guess with IT, they've got a very strong background in delivering change in technology and managing that technology. So you should be looking to leverage some of those skills in your IT teams. You may already have really high performing DevOps practices with pipelines that you could look to learn from and leverage as part of your RPA practice. Obviously, they should have a service desk. Should you be using those functions as part of your RPA practice? Does the people or the COE that I guess are maintaining the bots, do they want to be dealing with phone calls, or is that better routed to the service desk? Obviously, there will be lots of experienced tech BAs and testers in IT as well that can really power your program forward. I guess one of the big problems I've found in delivering RPA is actually getting test data for the bots for both development and test. And there's some really skilled people out there that have already solved these problems many times when testing IT changes. I guess for me, I know, I guess proof of concepts, there's a bit of noise happening at the moment, how probably the time for proof of concepts is over. I think probably proof of concepts or proof of values still have a place, but instead of proving the technology of RPA, it would probably be more about proving the approach. So how did we identify a use case? How well did we define it? How well did we design it? And then so on throughout that life cycle. And I know, like say, proof of concepts is like, what can we do in 5 days versus, well, let's actually test how well we can do this properly. And that's, I guess, going back to, you start with the end in mind. So if you're going to deliver at scale, you know you want to do each of those phases well. So how do you actually test how well your organization can do today? And where are you lacking in that automation lifecycle? Obviously, you need to have that value figure forefront with RPA, like what's the cherry we're going after, and then that needs to be kept along the whole automation lifecycle. If you get to, say, the design phase and you realize you're only going to get 20% of the outcome you're looking for, does that initiative need to stop there before you actually get a negative ROI? Yeah, I think we'd probably move on to the next slide.
So, okay, so what other design considerations that enterprises might think of when they're starting that effort?
Yeah, so this is a really passionate, I guess, thing for me. So I love reusable components. So tools like UiPath have the concept of libraries that you can build, like building blocks that you can use for future RPA initiatives. That obviously reduces maintenance costs, ideally, because you only have one place to make a change. You also have very high visibility of potential impacts to your digital workforce as well, as long as you're maintaining some digital process platform. So if you do have external change, either from technology or process, how do you quickly identify the building blocks that are going to be impacted? With design, it's also understanding, I guess on the point I made before, if you can deliver 50% of the bot, does that actually get a better ROI for the organization? Instead of going for the full 100% solution, how is the human workforce going to interact with the digital workforce? That's a big one. I guess a pretty common go-to is when there's an exception, the digital worker will send an email to a human for action. That's really inefficient. And is there a better way of actually adding value in that interaction? Can the digital worker provide a report with all the key decision points of data a human needs to make a cognitive decision to continue that flowing through the chain. How do you I guess in design, how do you make sure you aren't shifting effort from the business to your digital workforce operations? So again, with poor processes, what I've found is you actually are shifting operational effort from a business unit to highly skilled RPA operations teams. Yeah, so I think another key one would be the OLAs and SLAs. So what are the objectives you're trying to solve for the business? And are your digital workers, can your digital workers even meet those service levels and operational levels, or do you need more infrastructure, a different way of designing your bots? Yeah, so that's probably some design considerations, but there are many. Yeah, so I guess I touched on this before, the humans interacting with the digital workforce. So if you do have a way of interacting with the two workforces, I guess the more and more ways you introduce, you actually introduce more complexity into your automation platform. You introduce more points of failure. So is there a way of standardizing that? Are there existing workflow tools the digital workers can interact with to inject data into the next process that needs to occur in that end-to-end change? A really good thing of RPA is you're allowing your human workforce to focus on the cognitive, I guess remove that repetitive work or non-value adding work for the organization. So instead of engineers doing data entry, they can actually focus on what they're paid to do. Yeah, just conscious of time, Daniel. I'll probably move on to the next.
Yeah, cool. So I suppose the next one we're going to talk about here is how you can use process mining to supercharge your RPA effort. So we did a webinar last week on this. So if you're interested in that, please follow the links on our landing page. But so what's clear is that organizations are, I suppose, moving more and more to those evidence-based decisions, as we discussed, data-based decisions. And so, I suppose we can see that, process mining can expose a pathway to that business outcome in a clear data-driven way. And all you have to do is look at all of the various tools that I mentioned before, in terms of the acquisitions of process mining companies into those ecosystems. So I think we can say that process mining can help show the organization the examples of process flows and the interactions that achieve a desired result, as well as those where the processes miss the mark. So I suppose when designing RPA solutions, it would be correct to say, Jason, knowing the formula of what makes a process successful, and what doesn't makes decision far more subjective. So, I suppose, why do you think the process mining is a really key initiative for businesses as they're ramping up this effort?
I think it boils down to data. So you're looking at a process from a data view. You understand the true cost to the organization for that activity. You understand the current performance. The big one is you actually understand all the different variants of data in the process. So you can understand, is a process inherently complex because there's too many variants? And I guess that's represented maybe through loops of processing through the process mining activity. And I guess process mining really visualizes that for analysts, and it's very quick to do. I just love that it's all data-based and there's no emotion, no bias. It's just representing facts. Obviously, process mining doesn't give you, here's a script to write, off you go. It's more of a way of identifying areas that seem to be good candidates for automation or other, I guess, process improvement initiatives. It's also great because it may dictate your design as well. So there may be high volume variants that you can focus on in your design. So instead of trying to automate 100% of the variants, you might recognize you can solve just 2 of them and get a really good ROI for the organization. The cost activity analysis or the actual performance of the process is really good to understand as well. So can you deliver additional benefits to the organization by removing, I guess, a block in the process? Or are you introducing more risk into the process by processing a certain task at a rapid rate, but you're going to be creating a block further down the process? I guess with process mining tools, you can sort of simulate those theories. I guess you can create your digital workers and replay the logs to see what is the impact on the end-to-end process. Yeah, so I guess just to sum up, it's just seeing your process from a data view and fact base that you can carry forward through your, I guess, automation program all the way, especially into the design, knowing all those different variants. I guess you'll also understand the different test data you'll need to develop your solutions as well up front.
All right, so I suppose to wrap up, I suppose Leonardo, as we as Leonardo, we've sort of focused on outcomes and what we business. We work in a partnership model with our clients, and we work to take the strategy of the business that's, and ensure that it's designed, architected, improved, automated, integrated into whatever platform they need to interface with a desired stakeholder or customer. Okay, that's that end to end we keep talking about. I suppose, processes are only as good as the outcome delivered. An automated process that saves an organization lots of cash, is sort of worthless if the customer stakeholder experience is worse, or it results in a poor feedback or lower employee sentiment or something like that. So I suppose as we wrap up here, Jason, how does organizations go from a limited, dare I say, tactical spot fix type of RPA efforts to transition into that larger, holistic end-to-end automation strategy?
Yeah, it's a good question. With probably going back onto the data-based discussion we're having around process mining. So how do you present the value that the digital workers are doing? Obviously, UiPath have released their insights platform, recognizing probably a missing link in a lot of organizations actually representing the value that the digital workers are doing, even on a daily or hourly basis. Are they linked to to your automation strategy? Is there buy-in from your business units? Do they have custom dashboards created for themselves so they can see the performance of their digital workers and recognize when they may need a little bit of a tune-up to make sure that they're meeting their objectives? I guess a big thing that people like to say is how many bots someone's automated or how many processes they've automated, and that's probably not a great thing to sort of brag about, I guess. Are you just automating for the sake of driving up the amount of robots you have to take care of? I guess what to me speaks greater volumes is what's the NPS impact you've had on both employees and customers? How many hours of manual effort have you taken out of the business? How have you reduced costs? Have you increased revenue? I guess what are those key levers that you've sort of pulled with RPA? Obviously, with a lot of these RPA tools, you can log information at a very granular level of your process. So it actually unlocks greater insights for the organization, and they can actually start playing around with moving thresholds of the process. So if they decrease the tolerance level, does that actually allow 20% more throughput in the process? And what does that actually mean from a database? Yeah, so I guess for me, it's how do you take care of your digital workers, understanding the value that they're generating, because you do need to invest in that platform and keep them healthy, just because they're another employee for the organization.
Well, Jason, thanks for that. I'm conscious we've gone over time a bit. We've got a couple of questions for those who are on. If you've got your questions, please check them in the Q&A box. So we've got one from Mark. What is the cost of not investing sufficiently upfront in process-centric RPA requirements for designing, building, deploying, monitoring bots within the context of end-to-end value chains? That's a long question. You got an answer for that?
Ooh. Probably unhealthy bots, I would say, or I guess bots that probably don't quite hit the mark. that you could have achieved in that investment. With a lot of organizations, they may have stalled on, say, 5 licenses and they can't sort of take that next step. Whereas if you do that investment in how do you properly identify, how do you design, all of those things, it should be very much a process that enables the organization to deliver at scale. So probably the first thing is you probably wouldn't have much scale as a cost. I'll say you probably have a high maintenance effort with your operations for the digital workers. You may have a lot of changes required from from external factors. Yeah, so I think there's probably many things that can be impacted if you don't invest properly in your RPA. I wouldn't be able to nail it to one specific thing.
Question from Steve. Can you elaborate more on the role BPM can play in RPA design considerations and what the team in the future should evolve to? I presume he's talking about a BPM team, RPA team.
Yeah, okay. So BPM is really good because it's, I guess, a representation of the process that doesn't have flavors of grey. So RPA thrives in that. I guess, as Daniel spoke about before, the intelligent part of RPA is lacking sometimes, I guess, if you don't have those other technologies. So if it's black and white, RPA can thrive. So a BPM process map details a process which developers love in terms of the different paths and variants. Obviously, once you've deployed your bots in production, how do you understand what processes have been automated? What are your digital workers doing in production? Do you use a tool like BPM to hold the repository of process? Do you link something like a CMDB to your digital workers so you understand what technology platforms they're touching, what screens they're touching? When a change is triggered from IT land, can you quickly tell the number of processes that are impacted on your digital workforce? I think obviously BPM team is very process centric. I guess the middle word of RPA is process. So they actually make really good process analysts to feed in the pipeline, and they may be aware of inefficiencies as well that exist in processes today. And they understand, I guess, what levers you can pull in a process to unlock benefits as well.
Thanks. A few more questions before we wrap up. Joe asks, what's an example of a successful RPA implementation that you can talk to?
Probably my favorite one was when I worked with a retail business unit and they had a really mature analytics team. And I touched on it earlier. So they generated data loads for my digital workers that were delivered hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, in whatever case we needed. They already filtered out the records that wouldn't be able to be successfully processed by the digital workers. So when my bots got to work, they knew all the data they needed up front. They could perform all the logic checks as well, so they would understand where in the process they would need to go. And they focused on performing the actual value add in that process, is doing the actual task that is required in the application. So the actual footprint of the bots was greatly reduced because we didn't have to do too much screen scraping. Obviously, we did still verify some data elements throughout the process just to ensure there's been no changes done. But yeah, so those bots were very high throughput and success rate and very low maintenance, just because we didn't actually develop too much to get the outcome we needed in the applications.
Great. And last question from Rob. Can you elaborate more on automation on RPA testing?
Yes, this is really interesting. So I've had a look at UiPath's test automation platform, and that does look good. I guess with when you're automating processes, you're inherently building up a test case as well in your test landscape. the key thing to understand there is how do you feed that bot the data it needs in a test environment, and then how do you know the outcome it needs to have? Is it a business exception? Is it a successful result? Then how do you check that result? So I think UiPath's new automation platform provides that ability now. But again, it comes down to data. So how do you have to create bots to build up test data for each of the scenarios you need to test? Their data loads you can use in the platform, those type of things. But I guess if you can constantly regression test your bots in the landscape across multiple environments, you'll be able to identify if there's any impacts to your digital workforce earlier on in the piece. But at the same time, you can also identify where there may be defects being released into the production environment because they've had an impact where they shouldn't have had an impact to your digital workforce. And then you're sort of unlocking another benefit for the organization there, because organizations do spend a lot of money building up test automation regression suites. And technically that's what RPA programs are doing today.
I'm on mute. Thanks for all that, Jason. That's been really, really great. So thanks for all those who attended this webinar. It'll be available on download. You get an email from me sometime tomorrow from me with a recording. So again, thanks very much for coming along. Just a reminder, next week we have a serverless architecture is all the buzz in the infrastructure world. So Terry and I will be pulling that apart to help you understand what that is and how it can help your organization as we cope with a really online world. So again, thanks very much for coming. That's next Wednesday at 12:30. And yeah, once again, thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.